The Coffee People podcast is presented by Roastery Coffee Packaging. Roastery is a digital printing company that makes custom printed packaging for coffee products. They work with small, mid, and large coffee roasters nationwide. Go to roastery.com to learn more about their fast turnaround times, high-quality packaging products, sustainability efforts, and low printing minimums, which enable your small business to tell a really big story. If you are ready to upgrade those coffee bags, go to roastery.com. I'm excited to talk to you today. I want to get into the show here in a second. I wanted to start actually before we even get going by asking you, I was just thinking about this morning. You seem like a guy, just from my brief interaction with you, who's been to a few concerts.
More than a few, yeah. I'm going to one tonight.
Nice. What are you going to?
I'm going to go see this band called Botch. They're like an old metal band from, 90s,
Nice.
2000s. So.
Well, my question was, I went to my first concert last night since the beginning of COVID.
Wow.
And we're kind of past the point now where you have like these emotional, I'm in the world moments, with COVID. But
Right.
Last night I kind of had like a throwback to that because it was my first time in a concert venue, with all these people and the show going great. I was thinking about you in this conversation and wondering if you had a concert that like sticks out as like, oh, that was the first concert that hooked me.
Man, I don't know. I started going to shows like when I was a kid. I grew up in Fresno, California, and not a lot going on culturally there for a young person. So I think I was like 13. I started going to like these random little punk shows and just sort of fell in love with it. And that's what I did for, all through my, teens and 20s and 30s. It's slowed down a little bit now, but, post COVID, I was so excited to go see music again. So I'm back buying concert tickets. I don't know if there's any one particular show that really grabbed me because I just sort of fell in love with it from the very first one, even crappy little punk show in Central California,
That's awesome.
I think I fell in love with the people and the scene and just like the community of it all more than anything.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Coffee People podcast, which is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network and presented by Roastery Coffee Packaging. If you are a small business roasting excellent coffee, you want those beans to be showcased in an equally stellar package. You'll find what you're looking for at roastery.com. I'm Ryan Woldt, and this is the Coffee Podcast where we meet interesting people connected to the world of coffee. Today, we're chatting with Jason Double J Johnson. I had to actually look at my notes for his real name because everyone just calls him Double J. He is the co-founder of Black Rabbit Service Company. They are a commercial coffee equipment service company with locations in Portland and Los Angeles. And he's also the founder, executive producer, and host of Coffee Breath, a new TV show focused on cafes, coffee shops, and the coffee experience. Episode 3 of Coffee Breath is about to drop on YouTube. It'll be out on Friday, November 3rd. It is a day-in-the-life episode featuring 3 coffee professionals shot in 3 different formats. We'll chat more about his show on this show. So if you haven't already done so in anticipation, go fill up that coffee mug, because it is time for this Coffee People podcast chat with multi-hyphenate Double J. We should start this show.
Whenever you're ready.
And I'm going to start it how I always do, which is by asking you to tell us who you are. What's your name? Why are you here on the show? What's your company? And what's your role there?
Yeah, so I'm Double J. I am with Black Rabbit Service. We're based in Portland, Oregon, and we have a shop down in Los Angeles as well. And then I also do a side project called Coffee Breath,
which is like a full-on produced show, TV show on YouTube right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Right now it's living on YouTube, but we hope to find a home for it elsewhere soon.
I'll just start off by saying I watched the first episode, and when you told me about the show and gave me a card, we met at Coffee Fest, I thought, oh, that's cool, a little YouTube show. And then I watched it and I was like, wow, the production here is impressive. Like this
Yeah.
is a well done show. So let's just start off with that.
Thank you. Yeah. So the production actually surprised me as well. So it sort of started out like with my buddy who owns a production company. And we've been friends for a long time. We met through music. He worked with me at Stumptown for a brief period as well. During COVID, we were hanging out, and I was, we were in his backyard. I was helping him put a sauna together, and he sort of was like, "What if we made like a coffee show?" And I was like, "Oh, sure, yeah, that sounds fun." He got a camera out, and we started shooting some things on our own. And he's like, "Okay, if you have a couple bucks, I can put a crew together, and we'll shoot something." And so I threw down some cash, and we rolled out with like 12 people, like a full production team. It was wild. I hit up some friends here in Portland, and it's a real TV show. It's very impressive. I didn't know he had those skills at the time, but it was pretty fun to make.
I'm laughing a little bit to myself because I think we always underestimate the skills of the people we knew, the people we grew up with. Like
That you're close with.
I've seen what you were like when we lived together in college or whatever. Like there's no way you run an AI company now, that
Right.
employs a bunch of people. It just doesn't work.
For sure.
But of course they do. What is the quick elevator pitch of what this show is? If people go search for Coffee Breath on YouTube.
Yeah, I think for me, it is, there's so much food television out there, and it's so focused heavily on restaurants, and cafes often get overlooked in these shows, even though I would say cafes and coffee houses play a bigger role in people's lives than restaurants do for the most part. More people are going to be regulars at a cafe than they are a restaurant. And so for me, someone who's been a lifelong coffee industry person, it was really important to get those stories out there. And so that's what Coffee Breath is.
You just mentioned you're a lifelong coffee industry person. How did you get your start? I know this a little bit because we talked about it in person, and we have a little bit of similar family history here. But, how did you get into the hospitality industry in the first place?
I'm kind of a second-gen hospitality person. My folks were both restaurant workers, specifically in fast food. In the 70s and 80s, they worked for Burger King for a long time. And so when I was a kid, that's what my dad did. He ran a bunch of Burger Kings, and then eventually my folks bought a cafe and roastery in Fresno, California. That was right at the age I think I was like 13 or 14 when that happened. And so I was able to sort of start working in the cafe, making drinks. So it was my first job, really.
How long did you stay in that job? And did you have this experience where after a while you wanted to work, but you just didn't want to work for your parents?
I think like working for my parents was pretty cool. Actually, I remember it was never that stressful for me. I think, well, for me, mostly what it was I didn't want to stay in Fresno anymore. So I worked for them, in their cafe until I turned 18. And then literally like a month after I turned 18, I moved up to Portland and started, doing my own thing, living my own life.
Why Portland?
Why Portland?
Yeah, I mean, 18-year-olds, no offense if you're 18 and listening to the show, kind of doubt it, but it's certainly possible. Why do you make decisions when you're 18? But for you chose Portland, and you're still in Portland. So why there?
Yeah. So at the time, I had a large group of friends that we all played music and did life together in Fresno. And as we all sort of started to come into our own or graduate high school or whatever, half of my friends moved to San Francisco and the other half moved to Portland. I love San Francisco, but I was, drawn to Portland. It was further away from home. There was just more opportunity. It was a little more affordable to live in. The other thing I decided to do was to go to culinary school. And so that was part of coming to Portland. It was just easier to get into school here and do the thing. So, and then as far as still living in Portland, I didn't think I'd live here this long. I've been here for 20 some odd years now. And I don't know, you meet people, you build a community, you get into relationships. Time goes on, you start buying houses and doing the thing, and life just keeps going. And, it's comfortable here. I have like such a big community. It'd be really hard to leave at this point.
That is always a challenge, is the people. My wife and I are going through that right now where we're considering a move. But the big thing that keeps us where we are is we have 11 years of building friends and a community and work people you trust or don't trust. You know, you kind of, it's the devil, so to speak.
The golden handcuffs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, but it's, it's always out there, and we just waffle on, do you make a decision based on this or on that? And it's great when you hear people that have found a place that they fit. I'm assuming you jumped into a cafe job at some point. Somewhere along the road, you're going to start your own company. How does that come into play? What motivated it? Was there any steps in between, kind of just working and figuring out life and starting Black Rabbit Service?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot. I think like when I first landed in Portland, I knew coffee. I didn't coffee was like what I was going to be doing forever. I knew how to do it. And so I landed a job working for Starbucks actually, right when I got to Portland. So it's kind of strange to go from like small mom and pop cafe to big corporate cafe. But I actually learned a lot there, and it was a great place to work while I was going to culinary school because that was honestly more my passion at the time. I was more interested in food. And then coming out of culinary school, I got jobs in restaurants, but I really didn't like the culture of restaurants. There was this kind of like martyrdom, and like everyone was it was like a very toxic work environment to work in kitchens, right? It just didn't feel right to me. So after, doing kitchens for a couple years, I went back into coffee working for Stumptown. And so I got in at Stumptown in 2006, where it was still a pretty small company. There were only 3 cafes just here in Portland, and then they had a pretty healthy wholesale program. And at the time, it was so hard to get a job there. Everyone wanted to work for Stumptown. It almost felt like someone had to die to get a job there. It was crazy. But I got lucky. Some friends I played music with started managing their roastery. And they brought me in. So I got to bag beans and drive around Portland delivering coffee. And then while I was there, right when I got my job at Stumptown, my wife was also pregnant. And so I needed to make more money. I wanted to advance my career a little bit. And I saw that they had a tech department. So I was bugging Alex, who is now my business partner, to bring me on the tech team. And that's sort of how I ended up servicing equipment.
So once that happens and you're learning at Stumptown, you're getting into the technical side of coffee, and mechanical. I don't think a lot of people think about that when they go buy their cup of coffee. I certainly don't. There's somebody who has to fix these, espresso machines, which are, cost as much as a car does at some point, and
Absolutely.
It's a huge investment. How does that translate from just working for someone else to, I think I could be an entrepreneur. I think I could start something, and this is a partner that I'm going to work with.
Yeah, I think, I've always had like the entrepreneur spirit. I was always sort of an organizer and someone who would like bring people together to do stuff. Another thing that I did when I moved to Portland was I started a small record label. So I put out records for local bands here in Portland, and then I would help organize tours and do a bunch of stuff. And that sort of went away when I had my kid. But I think that was really one of the drivers for me wanting to start my own business. And then, I was really happy at Stumptown for a long time. I think Alex and I knew with all the growth we were going through, at some point things would change and Dwayne wouldn't be a part of Stumptown anymore. And, we didn't know who our bosses would be and things could get weird. And for us, it finally hit that point. There was the gray area, like kind of right when Stumptown got bought by Pete's. And we were like, all right, this seems like the time for us to step away and do this thing. So that's how Black Rabbit started.
What is it that Black Rabbit does or offers the coffee industry?
Yeah, so we are a equipment service company, first and foremost. So we service all the espresso machines around Portland, the Pacific Northwest, and Southern California. We also have a pretty robust sales program. So we sell a lot of gear too. And then a couple years ago, we started importing and being a direct distributor for Mahlkönig. So we offer wholesale and support around Mahlkönig nationwide.
One story I hear from a lot of local coffee roasters is how difficult it is to find people that can work on their machines if they don't know how to do it themselves. A lot of times they learn to be kind of de facto mechanics on their own, or Frankensteining equipment together. Is that something you're seeing where there's growth in that industry? I mean, I would assume you're hopefully busy all the time, but I can't think of a lot of other service companies I know by name. I know one or two here in San Diego, but we've got hundreds of coffee shops and cafes that just,
Sure.
how do you service all that? How do you manage that demand?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have this talk a lot as Black Rabbit, we look to new cities for growth and stuff like that because it does require a lot of density, a lot of coffee shops in one area to sort of make a service business sustainable. Because you might only see those customers a couple times a year, right? So there might be several hundred shops in a town, but you're also only going there a couple times a year. So how do you fill out your business? And that's by branching out and going to suburbs or cities just outside. You kind of define your area. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge problem in the industry. There's not enough technicians out there, and we kind of knew that as at Stumptown. We knew that we were really special in the sense that we had a full blown service department. There were very few other roasters that did it the same way we did. Intelligentsia, off the top of my head, did it as well. But I think we saw an opportunity in the market, like a gap where there was like, okay, this is something we know how to do and we do it well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go out and make it happen.
Is that something you teach other people? I mean, I'm just thinking about it in my head. Like if I wanted to become a coffee technician now, a coffee machine, espresso machine, work on that kind of a product, how would I even go about learning that?
So we've talked about this for a long time, like creating a school or allowing people to like pay to have us teach them. We don't have a program like that yet. There are some things you can do now. So the SCA has the Technicians Guild, and they're very slowly putting together training material. And, they're doing some good work. There's a couple of other folks out there who have started classes and whatnot. Ultimately, I think to become a service technician, it just takes time. There's no fast route to do it, right? Like I think you need to I always tell our new guys it takes at least 2 years before you're really comfortable in this job. It just takes that long to see everything that can come up, right? And then
Sure.
to understand like all the different brands and manufacturers and, all the ins and outs of all those things, learning all the little tricks. It just takes time.
Yeah, I'd imagine there's a lot of continual learning as new products are coming out. I'm imagining, like if you were an auto mechanic and then all of a sudden the Prius comes out, you're like, what
Right.
what is this? I don't know.
Throws
We're
you for a
starting from
loop.
scratch, right? I'm
For
assuming.
sure. And that's actually the part that I love about this job is because it's always evolving and, the manufacturers keep it really interesting for us. So keep us on our toes.
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Woldt, host of Coffee Smarter. We're headed into our third season of that podcast, and for the very first time, looking for a presenting sponsor to help us continue providing excellent, easy-to-understand coffee education. The Coffee Smarter podcast is devoted to helping our listeners brew a better cup of coffee at home. It is one way we can help uplift the community of craft coffee. If you have a business or you know of a business that would be a great partner in creating more passionate coffee drinkers, please reach out to coffeesmarterpodcast@gmail.com or connect with us through coffeesmarterpodcast.com. I notice you are drinking a cup of coffee and we're on a video chat. It looks maybe like in a nice, not neutral little cup. What are you drinking today?
This is a Little Buddy or Italiano, depending on your preferred language there. It is a shot of Ice Bear, roasted by Pipe and Tabor out of New York.
Oh, very cool. I'm not sure I'm familiar.
Yeah, they're great. Great little roastery. I think they pretty much just do wholesale and online sales.
Being in Portland, are you allowed to have a favorite shop? Being even in your industry, are you even allowed to say, this is like my local shop?
I knew this question was coming, and yeah, no, I never say who my favorites are. I'll say, we started actually at Black Rabbit a little series of we call it the weekends, and it's sort of all the shops we like to visit on the weekends.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard because I have my favorites that I like. We'll just go chill at on a weekend, but I don't know. I'm a fan of all coffee shops, and that might be a cop out answer, but I think
it's okay. I do that same thing.
I just love the culture, and anyone that's drinking coffee is okay in my book.
You've kind of brought it up a few times, just like this community you've built in coffee and in the Portland area over the last couple of decades. But you also did get that start in your family business. How has your relationship with coffee changed, over time? Does that make sense as a question?
I think so. Yeah. My relationship with coffee. I think I mentioned earlier it was just sort of a job for me when I first started. I was a kid. It was a way for me to like work in my family's business and earn a couple bucks. And I think my passion turned to food working in my parents' restaurant and cafe. But now I would say coffee, I don't know. It's kept my family going for so long, and it's supported my parents, and it supports me and my family. And I think it's just like it's the world to me. It's I don't know what else to say about it. It's just like it's all I've ever really known. I've thought about like other career paths. There was a moment before we started Black Rabbit where we were not sure if it was going to work. We were nervous, and so I was like, oh well, shit, maybe I gotta pick up the knives again or figure out how to bartend. But I just couldn't imagine a life outside the coffee industry. I didn't know what that would look like. It was hard to picture. So I'm glad I'm still here.
I'm glad you're still here too. I've enjoyed getting a chance to just meet you in person and now again on this chat. Where you see coffee and the industry as a whole kind of from a unique perspective on the tech side. You're literally experiencing a lot of different coffee shops, both personally and for work purposes. If not you, then your company. I'm not, I don't want to assume you're out on everything, but where do you see the industry going? I feel like we're at a weird time, but I'm still relatively new. My experience is much shorter than yours in this world. So, are we reaching this point of like, craft coffee has been around now for a little bit. People understand there's a difference between the stuff off the shelf, or do they? Where do you see this industry going?
Sure. Yeah, it's weird. I definitely think of it more from like the technician side of it, like just looking at the innovations that have come out recently and like what new gimmicks the manufacturers are coming up with to keep the products interesting and exciting. And it's weird. I feel like we're in like this weird kind of stalled out period where we've gone through all the cycles so many times of gear and what we think specialty coffee is, and we're sort of stalled out. I feel like we're all waiting for someone to do something that we can all latch onto and be like, yes, this is the path forward, And there's certainly people out there trying to figure that out. It does feel like a kind of an interesting time as far as innovation goes.
What about the robot barista that is ubiquitous at every convention that you go to?
And they're fun to look at, right?
Is that the future?
I I don't think that's the future. I really don't. I think there's a place for it. I think there's some fun spots that I could see that popping up in. Um, but I don't think it's the future. I don't think that's where people are going with coffee. For me, coffee's always been about people and community. I grew up hanging out in coffee shops and meeting friends there and playing cards, and I would sit there for hours and order coffee and get cracked out. And I just can't see that ever going away. I still see it, it's out there. My kid does that now. They're 17 and they go hang out at coffee shops. I have a hard time seeing it go away. I had a conversation the other day about equipment in particular with this guy who came into the shop, and he was asking about pressure profiling, which I thought was funny because it was like, oh man, that was like the big conversation a few years ago. And it's just funny to me how it's a cycle. Super autos are hot right now, and I feel like in a couple years everyone's going to be like, no, forget those things, we want to go back to manual everything. So it's how coffee's been the whole time I've been in it. It's just constant cycle of reinventing stuff.
When I learned how to pull a shot of espresso, it was on a manual, pull machine.
Oh
And
wow.
I think I was allowed to look at the machine for 6 months before I was allowed to pull the handle. And then it's probably another month before my dictator boss will let me actually serve one of those espressos that I pulled. So
That's
I blame
crazy.
him for my repetitive motion injuries now.
Yeah, totally. I've always said that too. Like the best baristas are the ones who had the worst equipment because they had to learn how to use that and operate it. A lever machine, man, if you see someone operate one of those, it's a thing of beauty if they know what they're doing, you know? And then you see other people and you're like, I am not going to drink that shot of espresso. Just fired right out of there.
There's a great segue, which is when you're out in the world at that unnamed favorite coffee shop, what are you going to order?
So it changes regularly, right? I'd say most consistently I get what we call a little buddy or an Italiano, which is a short Americano. But recently I've been drinking cortados. I've been drinking cappuccinos. So I'm also easily influenced. So if I'm with someone and they're like, I'm going to get a mocha, I'll be like, oh, all right, that sounds good. I'll do a mocha. So, but mostly if I'm by myself, it's a little buddy or cortados lately.
The word influence to me is like a trigger word now, with trigger buzzword. And I always, when my wife will send me something and be like, I want to get this, I'll be like, you've just been influenced. You know, she'll send me an Instagram or a TikTok. I'm like, you've been influenced, honey. I usually ask this at the top. I got distracted by the concerts and all the other stuff we've been chatting about. But I know you started it as a job and with the family, but do you have a memory of coffee where things maybe transitioned for you, or a coffee specifically, coffee experience that you remember that made you feel like it was something more than just going to work every day or doing what we do as a family?
Yeah, I think for me, it was actually like, I think getting my job at Stumptown was very like, it just felt so different than any other place I'd worked. At the time, it was 2006 when I started there. It felt like a cause, like we were actually like changing the world with, with coffee, and we were buying coffee at this really high dollar amount, and we were bringing producers up to taste their coffees in our cafes, and we were doing all this really amazing work. And it just felt really special, like a special time and a place that I got to be a part of. So for me, I think that was like what really made it like, okay, this is my life. This is what I want to do. One of the best coffee drinks I've ever had was at the Albina Press here in Portland back in the day, when they were like kind of the hot shit cafe in town. And, Billy Wilson had just won USBC and all, like, they were all competing, and competition was still early. And man, I just remember going in there and getting a shot of espresso that blew my mind. And, the God shot or whatever you want to call it, that you're chasing constantly. But definitely had a few experiences in coffee that were magical.
Well, actually, I think that was Albina Press might have been the last place that I went to for coffee in Portland.
Oh, nice.
Someone at SCA said, this is where you got to go. So that's where I went.
It's a classic, Portland classic.
I've learned to just listen to people. If I can walk there, if it's within biking distance, that's where I'm going.
There you go.
So what's next for Black Rabbit, for Coffee Breath, for you?
Yeah, Black Rabbit. So we want to grow this thing. We want more Black Rabbits in more cities. We're hoping to expand out to the East Coast a little bit. Maybe something in the Bay Area. We kind of skipped over the Bay Area in our West Coast tour here. So yeah, we don't know where we're going yet, but we know we'd like to expand and have Black Rabbit in more cities. As you mentioned, it's needed everywhere. So wherever we can help out or find a place that makes sense, that's where we'll go.
Sure.
As far as Coffee Breath goes, we are about to release the 3rd episode, which I'm very excited about. It actually should be out right now, but we're not there yet. So these things take time.
By the time this airs, it'll be out.
Yeah, exactly. I hope so too. And hopefully the 4th one will be going. So I'm working on episode 4. 3rd one should be released anytime. And then, yeah, we're just, we're continuing the path of, finding partners to sponsor and pitching to studios and streamers. So just very pushing forward.
What about you? What's next in the life of Double J?
I'm going to a concert tonight, so I'm excited for that. And then on Monday, I'm going to Italy. So I'm going out I'm going to Milan for Host. So I'm pretty excited to go check in and see all the new stuff out there.
Very cool. Well, I
Yeah.
really appreciate you taking a half hour to chat with me and share a little bit about you and what you guys are doing. Cheers. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. This is great. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you soon in person.
I hope so too. Okay, some key takeaways from the pod. Go get caught up on the first few episodes of Coffee Breath on YouTube. You'll find links in this show's podcast notes and in our weekly newsletter at roastwestcoast.com. Episode 3 of Coffee Breath will drop Friday, November 3rd. This came up on the show and I realize I do it a lot in my own life, but we often underestimate the skills of those closest to us, especially those we grew up with and have maybe, just maybe, made some bad decisions with. Double J has been able to overlap his business and his passion for coffee with his friendships, which is pretty cool. Double J and I talked a bit about restaurant culture. As someone who has spent parts of 3 decades working in restaurants, I promise you, things have changed a lot. If you want to know what working in a restaurant was like in the 90s and early 2000s, read Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. Water it down a little bit, and you won't be far off from reality. I definitely had more than a few chefs that wouldn't let me look them in the eye. For Double J, getting a job at Stumptown was a major turning point in his story. It's where he found a home when his culinary run was coming to an end, and where he found that his connection with coffee was more than just doing the work. Stumptown is a pretty big corporate name now. They were acquired by Peet's Coffee in 2015. But before that, they were pioneers on the forefront of coffee's third wave. They were visiting farms and paying more for quality beans long before it became cool. While the goal of every small business isn't to sell to a bigger company, it generally does involve continuing to grow. That success can attract life-changing opportunities, as it did for Dwayne Sorensen, the founder of Stumptown. As he pursued those, the changes in the business also motivated Double J and his future business partner Alex to launch Black Rabbit Service. They saw a gap in the market that they just happened to have the skills to fill. They are currently based in Portland and Los Angeles, but growth is in their future as well. Speaking of skills, there is no fast route to become a good coffee equipment technician. Double J tells his techs it takes up to 2 years just to feel comfortable. For him, it's one of the appeals of the job that he is continually challenged by an ever-evolving product landscape. He's been around long enough now to see cycles in the industry's preferred equipment. As for where is coffee going, Double J thinks we may be in a pause where everyone is looking around, like the Spider-Man meme, wondering, who is going to make the next move? Finally, is the robot barista the future? Double J doesn't think so, and I don't either. Thanks to Double J for taking time to chat with me and for being a pretty friendly guy in real life. You can find all of the important links from this podcast to Black Rabbit Service and to Coffee Breath, the TV show, in our newsletter on roastwestcoast.com or in this podcast episode's show notes. Speaking of the newsletter, sign up for that. We send out weekly emails with this podcast, our Coffee Smarter Education pod, columns about green coffee, the industry at large, and features showcasing our favorite baristas. You can sign up for free, or if you'd like to be part of the community supporting craft coffee and get this show ad-free, you can choose the paid option. Thank you for doing so. This free podcast is available to everyone because of the support of our great industry partners, like Roastar Coffee Packaging. Based in the Midwest, at Roastar, they create excellent coffee packaging that tells the big stories of small business coffee roasters. Learn more at roastar.com. Thank you to all of our industry partners, including Ignite Coffee Company, Maria Coffee, Cape Horn Coffee Importers, Zumbar Coffee and Tea, Moster Coffee Company, Steady State Coffee Roasting, San Franciscan Roaster Company, Crossings Coffee, Acento Coffee Roasters, Camp Coffee Company, Civets Roasting Machines, First Light Coffee Whiskey, Hasea Coffee Source, Coffee Cycle Roasting, and Ascend Coffee Roasters. I spent a day at one of Ascend's bi-monthly makers events last week and hosted a coffee beans guessing game. It's a simple game. Here's a jar of coffee beans. Guess how many are inside. I've done this little contest maybe 20 times in the past year, And despite the confidence exuded by some of the guessers, no one has ever gotten it exactly correct. Until the other day at Ascend Coffee Roasters. A big shout out to Delfino Lopez, who not only won some fresh roasted coffee beans from Ascend, he guessed the number of beans exactly at 1,669. Unbelievable. I'm gonna have to find a new jar because that one is getting retired. Thank you for listening today. This show is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network, and this episode of Coffee People has been written, produced, and recorded by me, Ryan Woldt. Always tip your baristas, and be sure to drink good coffee. Are you a burgeoning coffee roaster considering turning your hobby into a business? Learn from industry veteran and coffee expert Alden Hazuri of Crossings Coffee Company. Every month, the Crossings Coffee Corner column drops on roastwestcoast.com. Alden shares the ins and outs of what it takes to run a successful coffee business from the perspective of someone who has been there. Links to that column and Crossings Coffee in this episode's show notes. Hello, all you coffee drinkers out there. If you are in the early stages of your coffee journey, we want to support you. Season 2 of the Coffee Smarter Education podcast is now underway. The first episode on Blade versus Burr grinders is already out. If you want to brew a better cup of coffee at home, search for Coffee Smarter on your favorite podcasting platform and hit the follow or subscribe button. Or just go to roastwestcoast.com and sign up for the newsletter, and we'll send it to your email every single week. Thanks for being awesome and drinking coffee smarter.